Session of the day, which focuses, it has two great speakers who are going to discuss some two often overlooked processes that can improve safety in the industry. We got Pete Laux, who was continually employed by the Kiewit company since graduating from the Oregon Institute of Technology in 1980. Over that time, he has held many positions, including mechanic, maintenance engineer, mechanic, foreman, master mechanic, and a series of other, leading to district equipment manager. Pete's been involved in most all phases of equipment management, from troubleshooting, diagnosis, and repair to equipment cost controls and many others. He has also coordinated the equipment dealer company relations for property parts, service, and product support. Pete recently retired after 45 years of service at Kiewit. Also, we have John Zarian, who serves as the CCO's general counsel and senior director. Prior to joining CCO in 2016 and for 27 years, his private legal practice emphasized intellectual property and complex business litigation matters. John is an experienced trial lawyer, adjunct law professor, and mediator. He's been recognized as one of the top 100 lawyers in the Mountain States region. John has received his law degree from University of Southern California, holds a master's degree in finance from the University of Utah, and recently earned a certificate in dispute resolution from Pepperdine University. Thank you both for being here, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Well, thanks. We're mindful of the fact that we're running behind schedule, and also that we're standing between you and a happy hour, so we'll do our best to get out of here as close to on time as possible. I'm one of those guys that's probably a little technology challenge. There we go. I got the slider advanced, so I'm doing all right so far. Just a quick introduction, overview. There's two parts to this presentation, and Pete and I will speak to each of them. So first, the main question is, how do we improve safety, is what we asked ourselves. And the two answers, first, verification processes is one, and then we'll turn to reporting is how we'll approach it. So Pete and I will each speak to each of these parts. I should mention that it's a privilege to present with Pete. Pete's a longtime member of our board of directors, amongst all the other things he's done in the industry. So it's cool to be presenting with him. Let me kick off then with the verification of certifications part of the presentation. So maybe just for context, and all of you probably, most of you know this, is a requirement for certification with a few exceptions, and I've kind of summarized them there. For crane operators. That's to be distinguished from requirements that are applied generally to other personnel, such as riggers who must be qualified and the like, but I'm focusing here on this part on certifications, which must come from a nationally accredited body and apply to crane operators in construction, is sort of a summary of that. So how do we distinguish between certifications and other credentials? This is a oft-discussed topic in credentialing world, but essentially certifications are they feature standardized assessments. That's sort of the key element of a certification. A certificate, and it's easy to confuse the two, actually is a different standard under ANAB, but essentially it may involve an assessment, but for the most part it just says that you completed some training meeting certain guidelines. That's different than degrees. It's different from licenses, which are things that governments issue. But the one that gets a little blurry is the idea of a qualification. And I'm going to come back to this here in just a minute. But qualification means that you possess necessary skills, knowledge, experience, training, credentials to perform a specific task or role safely and effectively. And there's probably other things we could talk about, badges. There's other kinds of things that we can see in the industry that qualify as credentials. But one thing maybe to specifically distinguish between is a certification and a qualification. So operators working in construction must still be qualified, or not working in construction, that's to say, I should say. And so what does qualification mean? We talked about that, but how is that evidenced? A certification would be evidence of some evidence of qualification for sure, but what we've seen is qualifications that are issued by trainers, by others as well, that start to blur the line a little bit. They start to look like certifications. Some of them will have expiration dates. Some of them, you get a card, for example, and evidence of that. So they may have an expiration date. Yeah, so it starts to blur the line between what a certificate might be, what a qualification might be at any given point in time, and a certification which is portable. So those are things maybe to distinguish, things to look for, and that's the context sort of against which I'll talk about specifically the verification of certifications. And so from the CCO perspective, which is how I tackle this, what that has meant traditionally, historically, your evidence of certification was a card. And it was in your wallet, and you took it out, and someone made a copy of it, I think it was mentioned earlier, makes a copy of it and keeps it in your file when you go to work. Well, we've seen a lot of fraudulent cards. And these are some examples ranging from really crude, bad ones to some that are pretty good. Some are pretty slick. So, I mean, if we piece these together, and we've got some folks on our team that just can spot this immediately, but it's things like the signatures may be wrong, right? That person, wasn't CEO or wasn't chairman of the board at the time. You've got the numbers could be, you could spot that they're not the right kind of number. You can see up at the top right, certified crane operator instead of NCCCO certified. The logo on the left top is off. So the color's off on that one too. That was a particularly poor one. But some of these actually get pretty good, surprisingly good. The dates can be off. Sometimes they'll skip the commas between the different designations. There's a lot of things. But still, these may be good enough to fool an employer, right? And that's the goal, is they're trying to fool the employer. So eventually they'll come to our attention. These are all reported and came to our attention, and that's how we have copies of them. But it's a little bit worse than that. It's not just people maybe on their computer or trying to Photoshop something on their own. This is actually something that we caught earlier this year. There was an outfit on Facebook using our logo and our name to make posts to try to get people to contact them and pay money to get a card. And these are pretty good. These are pretty good imitations. And when you read this, it's really horrifying. So it says, it's friendly. It says, hello, exclamation mark. Are you too busy to get your crane certificate? That's wrong, right? Established. Have you been going for the exams but can't pass? Or are you not up to standards? If so, this is the group for you, apparently. We are here to help you to get your crane certificate without any difficulty. Apparently, it's just going to take some money. Contact us. And so these folks were selling, we learned, there's a sister sort of site on Facebook that we found. They were selling driver's licenses, other types of certification cards. And so we, not only did we get this shut down through Facebook, we actually reported them to the FBI. We really wanted to throw the book at them. So hopefully they'll track them down and do something about that. But this is what we're up against. It's actually a mill that's selling certification cards, rather, online. Here's the history of counterfeit card cases. So there was a time, when we started shifting to the new card that we thought, we have solved this problem. We were way down. I'm not sure we had maybe 5 in 2021 counterfeit card cases. And then you saw it kind of blew up in 2023, and we had, at the end of the year, about 20 for all of 2024. So it's an ongoing problem. We hope it'll, it's peaked and is now maybe going back down to hopefully nothing, but there's still folks, and as long as they can fool an employer, still folks who do this and present these counterfeit cards. The solutions we've come up with, are these. We've got the, look, it's a lot tougher, right? Look at the card on the left there. It's a lot tougher to try and come up with a QR code, something that looks like a QR code, not to say they wouldn't try, but there's no designations shown on there. It's forcing the employer to have to go to VCO. And so as we phase these in, it takes 5 years to phase them in, right? But at some point, we can say, if you don't see a card with that QR code on there, it's not valid. That's how it's going to work out. And if you do check the QR code and you go to the VCO, that's what you'll get. We've added some features here. Obviously, it shows the specific expiration dates, the designations. At the top, there's a timestamp. So if you get a snip or a snapshot of this and it doesn't have the timestamp, that's what it'll show. It'll show what it's current as of when this was accessed and viewed. And hopefully, someone's not relying on, I'll tell you why in a minute, not just relying on a snapshot, but actually going to VCO as a potential employer. Because otherwise, here's what will happen is we had someone that actually faked an email from CCO to himself. And we were ostensibly sending a snapshot of the VCO to the certificant, would-be certificant. Yes, Mr. So-and-so, here is your verification information. Went to great lengths, right, to forge an email and this snapshot, which was false and fake, we could tell that, and then produced a copy of this to the potential employer as the quote evidence. Fortunately, it was brought to our attention. Again, that's what happens. They'll bring it to our attention if there's any question. So you have to exercise caution. Individuals have forged the VCO results, as you can see here. They may even, who knows, in the future, someone may try to forge or try to dummy up one of these QR codes. I don't know, maybe you could fake one and have it go somewhere that had a result for yourself. I imagine that's possible, that, people will go to great lengths, and you wonder if they only studied that hard, if they just put that much effort into actually passing the test, they could probably do pretty well. But they don't. They rather try to do it this way. So, there's issues, and you have to be really wary, even with the VCO. But we think that coupled with the QR codes will go a long way towards solving the problem. Just a note about what happens when there's sort of a failed VCO verification. If an employer checks, potential employer checks, most of the time they will call us and say, hey, because the employee is saying, I don't know what's going on, or would-be employee, I don't know what's going on, I know I'm certified, just call CCO maybe. And so they call us, and customer service takes the call, and they search and they say, nope, definitely not certified. And will you send us please a copy of the card? And that's how these cases, every one of those cases on the previous page, pretty much came to our attention that way. It was through the employer who sent us a copy of the card, and we're able to address it that way. It's referred to the Program and Integrity Team, makes its way to the Ethics and Discipline Committee, and they will treat this candidate under the Code of Ethics and preclude them from testing for a time. The times vary, and usually that time starts to run from the time that the card is actually returned. You've got to return the card, which some of them will never do, right? The fraudulent card. So just a couple more slides then on this need for ongoing verification. Another thought here. There was a case that goes back, most of you may be familiar with this, the Chavez litigation. It's litigation now. It was an incident before, led to the invalidation of hundreds and hundreds of exams. But there was one individual who was revoked as part of that. The exam was invalidated, not revalidated, that he had taken. It was obviously suspect, and he did not return the card. That card was presented to an employer the next month, and that individual was involved in a fatality in March of that year, just 2 months later. A pretty bad case, resulted in an OSHA investigation. We received a grand jury subpoena for information, which we provided. There's been litigation that we're aware of. Just recently, in October of last year, that same employee, that same certificant, former certificant, apparently produced that same card, which he never returned to us despite our demands, for potential employment. So that individual's still out there using that card, which has been revoked. And of course, anyone who went to the VCO would find out that it was revoked. That's what came to our attention. But that's why that step is so important. And so the issue that this raises is the need for ongoing verification of the certification, right? And the question in that case will be, the employer that hired this individual said, oh, I checked it back in December, and maybe before we were revoked, or he was revoked, and it was good then. But then at some point that person was revoked, right? And so how often do you need to check? Does it every day the person gets sent on a job? I mean, maybe they won't tell you, right? They get revoked and they don't bring it to your attention as an employer. What do you do in that case? And so that's a real challenge. It's an issue that we're aware of, and this is my last slide before I turn things over to Pete on this topic. But we are developing, this was mentioned earlier today, maybe in questions, but in answer to those questions, we are developing an employer dashboard. And so that dashboard, it actually is for more than employers potentially, right? Because if you think about it, what about the insurance company that really, maybe wants to track those things, or others, a state that requires certification could actually create a dashboard as well and use this kind of feature. Each of these will require that the certificants agree to consent to have themselves on the dashboard, right? But provided that consent is given, and you'd have to manage it, there's got to be a way to take it off, or the employer to take it off when they no longer need it. But it's a way to manage that operator certification for all those individuals, and it could pop up, right? The moment that someone's revoked or the credential expires, it could pop up and you get an alert on that dashboard. It'll be a great thing. Joel Oliva is working on very hard on this with Mark Hone, and they're going to be getting this out to you as soon as they can. So with that, let me turn it over to Pete, and we can pause at the end of this first part and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, thanks, John. Just to get started here, there's a lot of things as an employer that we manage with crane operations, but really one of the more important things is how we qualify crane operators. You know, certification is one thing, and I know you guys understand where when the OSHA rule came out, you know, they actually kind of preempted their definition of a qualified person as it relates to crane operators. So to be qualified as a crane operator, you got to be trained, certified, and evaluated by your employer. And it's even in our world, it's one of the most important parts of verifying the knowledge and skills beyond certification that an operator is qualified to run a certain type or size of crane. So just to give you guys a little insight into the Kiewit companies and what we do to qualify our operators, to give you a little bit of overview of what we internally call our authorized operator process. And to start with, you know, when we are going to put an operator in a crane, you know, we qualify them to basically the crane type and a size range as well as the manufacturer. So for example, you got an RT crane and one of the authorizations we have is 89 ton on down and Tadano. So that's a specific qualification or authorization for a crane operator. If we put him into a bigger crane, or he wants to run a bigger crane, that would be a separate qualification or authorization. We also do qualifications for crane attachments. You know, those are additional qualifications, like for a luffing jib if it's on the crane, a jib, or for cranes on barges, pile driving. Those are all additional qualifications, or you could kind of call them endorsements as well to his authorization. These are all performed by what we internally call an authorized examiner, or what it'd be the qualified evaluator. And these guys are vetted and have that internal credential, and we do have criteria that they got to meet to be able to do this. So they're the only guys that can qualify or authorize our operators. The process we use, it's part of our LMS system. And inside that, there's steps, or they're actually modules that are built into the system that we take the operator through, that he has to complete and be approved by the examiner. You know, probably just as important in our world is it becomes part of the employee's profile. So if he's operating cranes on one project and we want to take him across the country to another project to run cranes, that authorization follows him. So we don't have to do it again if it's the same type of crane. But on a big view, the whole process consists, we want to make sure they have the right knowledge, so it includes a knowledge assessment. We want to make sure they understand our crane policies and procedures. So we spend a fair amount of time to make sure they understand those and those expectations as a crane operator. And then it also includes a practical skills assessment. Now, this is just not a one-page deal. You know, it can take 1 to 2 days to get an operator through this and qualified, depending on the complexity of the crane or those kind of things. So, and it also includes pre-employment drug screening, which we do that with all our employees, crane operators included. You know, basically, to give you a quick overview, it's basically 2 parts. The first thing we do is verify their CCO and their med card. You know, and then we talked about the first part including a knowledge assessment and, you know, an introduction and going over our crane policies and procedures. And here's a quick list of the things that we go through and kind of what it looks like within our learning management system. But you'll notice there's a pretest. One of the first things we do is have them take a pretest. And it's not hard, but it gives the examiner, hey, does this guy really know what he's doing? You know, it's almost a stopping off point. If the examiner doesn't feel like this guy ain't going to make it, you know, we can end it right there. But it goes through our crane manual review, several things, our lift planning expectations, and there's actually 18 steps in this first part of the process. The second part is a practical and technical field assessment. And this is actually done, there's about 50 tasks out in the field that the examiner takes the operator. And part of it is an operator's manual review, is making sure that he knows where the information is in the operator's manual. And we go through all these different areas, and he has to demonstrate these skills: inspections, signaling, setting up the computer on the crane. And one of the criteria for our authorized examiners, obviously they need to be familiar with how to run the crane, how to navigate the LMIs on certain cranes, so they know or can coach that guy on properly setting up the computer in the crane. All the way down to how you access and egress the crane, housekeeping expectations, crane setup, actually making sure he can select the right load chart for the configuration of the crane, as well as understanding that load chart and the notes in the load chart that go with it. And obviously it includes time for them operating the crane, their load handling skills, can they operate multiple functions simultaneously, their ability to take signals, they don't just start doing things on their own without being directed by a qualified signal person. But just to back up, we talk about the first step in this process is verifying their certification and medical card. We do 100% use Verify CCO online. And we do get other certification cards, but the vast majority of our operators will come to us with a CCO card. But we'll take a screenshot of the VCO page. We verify that they have the right certification for the type of crane that we want to put them in. And we take a picture of their cert card, and that gets uploaded to their employee file. And we also track their expiration dates. So we know when their certification's getting ready to expire, as well as their med card, so we can remind them or help them so they can get all that re-upped. And, as I mentioned, we do get other certification body cards. On our internal portal site, we do have links to those particular NCCER, the OECP, and others to take to how we get to where we can verify those cards. We just don't accept a card without verifying it. Lastly on this, on verification and qualifications, is we do a similar process with signal persons and riggers. It's a kind of a twofold situation where if a person comes to us and wants to be a signal person, if they do have a valid certification from an accredited certification body as a signal person, we do accept that as being qualified with some field observations. If they don't, we do have an internal process to qualify both signal persons and riggers. Similarly, in our LMS system, where they take a test and have a field verification. For signal person, it's kind of a three-step deal. They can take a pre-test. If they test out, they can pass the written part. If they can't, there's a training element in that and take the test. Similarly with riggers, and we do have two classes of riggers, a rigger 1 and rigger 2, but both of those, there's actually a field assessment where they have to go out and demonstrate skills from a task list, and like with the operators, it goes into their employee profile, and we show them as qualified if they make it through the process.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, as you can tell, Kiewit has a very robust system for verifying their personnel and their credentials and qualifications. So that's really impressive. I know it's been recognized in the industry as such. So the second part of the presentation is about reporting. We talked about verification of certifications and credentials. We're now going to be talking about reporting and how that can contribute to safety on the job. So just, again, a little context here. You're well aware of, incident reporting requirements under 29 CFR 1904. Employers must notify OSHA when there's certain types of injuries and fatalities, of course, on the job. But the question comes up, what are CCO's reporting requirements? And the short answer is, well, not much, I suppose. We don't have any jurisdiction over employers, right? So an employer, it has to be voluntary, and we rely on them, and many of them will bring things to our attention. They feel like this person who's trying to pass off a fraudulent card or been involved in a safety incident or whatever the case may be, substance abuse. They will often report it to us because they don't want that person to go to work, down the road for someone else. We do we do require that certificates self-report themselves if they no longer meet the requirements for certification. That much is clear. And they also must cooperate with investigations. So the certificates themselves are subject to some requirements. But when does this come up most often? I'm going to talk about two situations. One is safety, incidents involving safety issues, and two is substance abuse. This is just some excerpts from our Code of Ethics. Basically says you have to be safe, you have to be very mindful of that, and that's embodied in the in every certificate's Code of Ethics, right? So that's there. Obviously, that's in some point, it's in many cases disregarded. I'm going to have to probably get your help a little bit here, TJ. I have a video here I'd love to play. I don't know, with no laptop in front of me, how that's going to happen. Is there a way to make that happen? This is an embodied video. If maybe someone in the back can help us play that. But this is a case that was reported to us in July of 2023. We're good? Okay. And it'll happen? Beautiful. All right, we're going to try this. So let me set the stage. Memorable. Reported in July 2023. Crane operator takes the crane home. He does a job on the way because there's some trees need to be trimmed. Works in an apartment building, or lives in an apartment building. Parks it there and decides he's going to let his nephew take a spin on the crane. And so here's what happens. Okay, you can see the movement there. It's going to go bad. It's going to go really bad. There was a guardian angel there that day. And so then the operator runs over. Yeah, it's just amazing no one got killed. So obviously, we understand substance abuse was involved. This was reported by the employer. Ultimately, this individual's certification was revoked by the committee, and also there was a requirement to provide a clean drug test and evaluation before any reentry. Another case reported October 2024, hydraulic mobile crane extended only the rear outriggers and then tried to rotate the boom cab. It toppled over. The boom came and the jib came to rest against the staging tower. You can see the damage there. Not a great quality picture. This too was reported by the employer, and the certificate was revoked by the Ethics and Discipline Committee. It was found to be the responsibility of the certificate. So we rely on employers to report these to us, but we know they don't always get reported. We had a subpoena just last month. There was a complaint alleging negligence. There was serious injuries. Apparently, according to the plaintiff's lawyer, known substance abuse was involved, but no report had ever been made, still has been made to CCO. In fact, we asked the plaintiff's lawyer, said, well, send us the information, and maybe we can act on it, but nothing was ever sent. So we still have no documentation of this on that particular case. So as a practical matter, we really rely on employer reports for these cases. Let me talk about the other situation where this comes up, the issue of reporting comes up often, substance abuse. We have a substance abuse policy that's been in effect. It's been tweaked from time to time, but you can't do anything related to your certification while under the influence or impaired by something that could be expected to impair you while working in the workplace. So we get reports, and I'll give you a couple of, just a flavor of these. One from an employer, this was October 2024. We get a report that someone had failed a pre-employment drug test. And there's a documentation of failed drug tests that's provided, and so admitted drug use. And so we referred this to the E&D committee with a report. After investigation. They suspended those certifications until the certificate could provide a negative drug test and a drug counselor's evaluation. Maybe one of the more memorable ones here in this category, was a self-report. This was the first time we ever had a self-report by someone who said, effectively, they were complaining about a training provider. And here's what the complaint sounded like. It was basically, this training provider had no business training me because I am a known drug user, and I was under the influence the whole time, and they should have known that, and I want my money back. Can you help me? And we said, so wait a minute, back up to the drug use part. Now, what we found in this case is he was only a candidate, and we had a little loophole in our substance abuse policy. It applied to certificates, not necessarily candidates. And so the board amended that policy, and it now provides that you can't be a substance abuser as a candidate or a certificate. But unusual fact pattern there with this self-reporting. But maybe a few more examples, but we do have to be cautious in this area. So we received a PIT hotline report in February from a coworker alleging a failed drug test and that someone was taken off the project as a consequence. This was by one of his workers. We had to close the case ultimately. We couldn't get any documentation, no one to release information, and so we had nothing to go on, unfortunately. So that's one that seemed like a case that might have some merit. In another case, a wife reported her own husband. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right? For drugs and alcohol, said he'd been cheating on his drug tests, and someone else provided, the fluids that weren't his. We couldn't open that case either. We didn't have an employer report or documentation or any evidence either. Again, where we have the most success here is when we have a report by the employer. Another one, this is the most unusual one I'll share with you here today. There was a claim that by someone that they were reporting their own brother-in-law for using a fraudulent card, but also just being a terrible drug abuser. See the attached failed drug test report. When we investigated that drug test report, I don't know how our staff came up with this in the legal department, but it turned out that it matched a sample drug test report online. Like, it was exactly, you compared the two, it was identical. They'd taken that one, photoshopped it, put in the name of this other alleged brother-in-law in there, and so it looked at the same results, everything was the same, all the same information. Looked like they'd failed the drug test, only it wasn't the brother-in-law. It turned out it was the boyfriend of his estranged wife who was trying to get him fired and his certification pulled. So we do have to be cautious here, but again, really, the best tips are the ones that come from employers. We can rely on those. We have some documentation, and the rest we really have to look at pretty closely. So with that, let me turn over to Pete on this second part of our presentation.
Yeah, thanks, John. Just real quickly, when we talk about crane safety or safety in general, I think within any organization, it really, the important part of that is you have a safety culture within your organization. It really starts at the top. You got to be serious and committed, constantly communicated. It really becomes part of the company's DNA, just the whole attitude towards safety, which will become part of each employee's DNA. And as well, you have to have processes incorporated into all the operations so that it becomes effective. And one thing within the Kiewit companies, we did this several years ago, is we developed these two documents. And one of them is we call it our crane manual, but it's our crane policies and procedures. And you can see several areas that we cover in this manual. And likewise with rigging procedures. Actually in the crane manual, there's like 33 sections or chapters or items that we cover where we give policies and then also procedures on how we address each one of those areas. So really what it does is, and what it was meant to do, is really set standards for consistency in our crane operations across the whole company. Everybody playing off the same sheet of music. With any document like this, you think, well, it'll sit on the shelf and gather dust, but I can guarantee you these here are constantly communicated, and the importance of the expectations that are in these documents. And it actually is part of our crane operator evaluation process, like I mentioned. So we make sure our crane operators make sure they understand these expectations here before they can allow to be run our crane. We actually, the hard copy of the crane manual is in every one of our cranes. And it's also a living document. You know, there could be some things that aren't sure or not clear. You know, annually we review this and we'll edit it and come up with another revision and issue it across the company. And really what it comes down to, it is our basis of how we do business with cranes. You know, in one section in there, we do have an incident reporting policy. And it's internal reporting for Kiewit. And these procedures are outlined in that section. You see there's a lot of criteria and some other language. Basically, any unplanned event that involves a crane, we want to report it internally. You know, and it's the reporting process is part of our whole internal safety reporting system. You know, here's just a quick example of an incident report. You know, so we gather, you know, general details, a description, contributing factors, you know, causal factors, corrective actions, can attach pictures. They assign a potential severity level, as well as all these other additional details. So it actually gets entered into our safety reporting system. With each one of these, we do have a review process. So, and typically that's with our regional crane managers. You know, they see these reports, they'll review them, is it to the right detail, or are they getting the facts proper? You know, they can return them to get it corrected before they're 100% in our system. So there is a review and a final acceptance process for these reports. Now, with all these, we have a reporting that we have available within the company. It's a Power BI report, and there's various levels of hierarchy of the detail. This is a quick snapshot of kind of a higher level detail of the type of crane, experience of the operator, you know, what region within the company did that happen in. And attached to this, we also have a metric where we generate an incident rate based on 1,000 operating hours of our cranes. So if our fleet goes up and down, or utilization of our fleet goes up and down, we have a metric that sees if we're improving or not. And this reporting is available to all employees within the company. You know, and I just given you a couple snapshots, but you can drill down on these causal factors, a lot of different things to see trends where, you know, you can quantify areas to focus for what we need to improve upon, as well as, you know, identify areas where maybe we need additional training or can help identify accountability. You know, well, what else do we do with it? We have a monthly corporate safety communication that goes out of our safety department across the whole company. Crane incidents and some highlights of certain problems or issues get highlighted in there. We also send a more detailed summary report once a month across the whole company just about crane incidents. They can be an additional focus during a project crane operations assessment, which is another thing we do across the company over the year. We'll pick certain jobs, or we'll do a week-long operations assessment of all their crane operations on the job. So if there's an area of the company or focus where we're doing a crane assessment, we can take that information and make sure we can focus on that during that assessment. It also could possibly help us make adjustments to our policy and procedures manual. I did make one comment here: avoid being data rich and information poor. You know, we can collect a lot of data, but if you don't put it in a report where it's usable information that's practical, that you can make actionable decisions about, it really isn't worth anything. So it's important to keep that in mind. Probably the last thing, as far as employer responsibility, you know, for reporting to the certification body, this would have to do primarily with an operator's conduct, or possibly a program participant, if they're employees of us, you know, like test site coordinators, proctors, you know, and it would typically have to do with a violation of the certification body's code of ethics, their program participant agreement, or their substance abuse policy. So from our point of view, what we feel we have a responsibility is if there is a behavior action that results in a significant safety risk or is unethical, you know, and it truly is the fault of the operator, is we need to gather all the proper facts and make sure that we have the right facts that support the result of the incident. Needs to be unbiased. You know, any emotions or what you think of the guy or don't think of a guy, you got to keep that out of it. It's just based on the facts. And 110%, if the fault truly lies with the operator, you better make 110% sure that's where the facts take you to before submitting a complaint to the certification body. And I would tell you, from our viewpoint as an employer, you know, if we have a significant safety incident and it truly is the operator's fault, you know, we're going to terminate employment with that guy. But if it's something that's habitual or significant behavior for an unsafe act, you know, that guy could go to another employer and have the same behavior and actually hurt somebody. So if this truly is the case, we do feel a responsibility that needs to be reported to the certification body and then let their disciplinary investigation and process figure it out from there. So.
Great. Well, that concludes our presentation.
Yeah. So I know we've gone over, but I appreciate everybody sticking around. But if there are any burning questions before we thank these gentlemen and I officially wrap up. All right, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate you. So I know it's the end of the day. I just want to officially thank everybody, remind you that there's an evaluation that's going to come out. Thanks for staying a little longer. That's on me. So hopefully you got some good information out of this, and have a great rest of the day. All right, thanks.